Power. Some people wear it like a crown, others like a weapon. In a world where titles excuse cruelty, a CEO's word can turn men into monsters. And that night, inside a glass tower gleaming over the city, his bodyguards proved it, when they decided one old janitor was worth less than their pride. No one dared to move, no one dared to speak. Until he walked in. Before we continue, we just want to say thank you truly for being here with us. Every like, comment, and share helps us bring you more stories that remind the world what courage and kindness still look like. So, if you haven't yet, take a moment to subscribe because stories like this one deserve to be heard. The lobby of the Ardent Tower gleamed like a mirror, polished marble floors, glass walls that reached the clouds, and the quiet hum of money in the air. Every surface reflected wealth. Every voice that echoed inside belonged to someone who believed they were above the rest. But as night fell and the city lights flickered awake, the sound of footsteps changed. The leather shoes were gone, the click of heels faded, and in their place came the soft squeak of a mop. The janitor moved slowly, his gray uniform blending into the dim glow of the lobby lights. His name tag had long since faded, but his name, Frank, was stitched just enough to still be read. He'd been working there for 14 years. 14 years of empty hallways and quiet shifts. 14 years of making the place spotless before the people who never looked at him came back to dirty it again. To most, he was invisible, the ghost of the building. And on that night, when the clock hit 11:45 p.m., he was the only one left who didn't belong to the world upstairs. Frank leaned on his mop and sighed. His hands ached, the knuckles swollen from years of scrubbing floors that never stayed clean. But tonight, something felt heavier than usual. Earlier that day, he'd gotten a call from his landlord, another rent increase. His daughter, Emily, had texted saying her asthma medicine was running low again, and his last paycheck, it wouldn't stretch enough this time. He had quietly decided this would be his last week. He couldn't keep up anymore. But quitting meant no insurance, no stability. And for someone like Frank, those things didn't come back once lost. He was rinsing his mop in the bucket when he heard laughter. Loud, careless, the kind of laughter that fills space like arrogance does. He turned. 3 men in suits stepped off the elevator, drunk on more than just liquor. They were big, clean-cut, wearing earpieces, bodyguards. Behind them walked their boss, Richard Langford, the CEO of Ardent Global Holdings, the kind of man whose name appeared in glossy magazines beside words like billionaire and visionary. Frank quickly stepped aside, lowering his head. "Evening, sir." Langford didn't glance at him. "You missed a spot," he said coldly, stepping right over the wet floor. Frank nodded. "Yes, sir." One of the bodyguards, a tall man with a shaved head, snickered. "You hear that? He's talking to you like he works here." The others laughed. Frank tried to ignore them. He went back to cleaning. But as he did, his hand brushed the edge of a glass. A single half-full tumbler left on the marble ledge. Before he could stop it, it tipped. The whiskey splashed across the floor, spreading toward Langford's shoes. Frank froze. "Oh no, I'm so sorry, sir." Langford stopped walking, slowly turned. The air seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You just ruined a $2,000 pair of shoes." Frank stepped forward, panicking. "Sir, I'll clean it right now. Please, it was an accident." The nearest bodyguard shoved him back with one hand. "You think you can touch him?" Frank stumbled but caught himself. "I didn't mean." "Don't talk," another barked. "Just watch where you put your wrinkled hands." Langford sighed, bored more than angry. "You people always say it's an accident. Maybe if you paid attention, you wouldn't be mopping floors at your age." That hit harder than it should have. Frank swallowed hard. "Sir, please, I didn't." The first bodyguard smirked. "You heard him, you people, always clumsy, always sorry." He kicked the bucket. The dirty water spilled across the floor, soaking Frank's shoes and pants. The sound echoed through the lobby, the slosh of humiliation. Frank froze. The instinct to fight rose and died just as fast. He wasn't a fighter anymore. His back couldn't take it. His hands couldn't either. He crouched down silently, picking up the mop again. The guards laughed. One of them leaned down, voice dripping with mockery. "Come on, old man, say thank you. We just made your floor cleaner." Frank stayed quiet. Langford turned to leave but stopped when Frank whispered, barely audible, "No one should treat people like this." The words slipped out before he could stop them. And everything went still. The bodyguard's laughter stopped. Langford slowly turned, his cold smirk returning. "What did you say?" Frank straightened. "I said you shouldn't treat people like they're nothing." The men exchanged glances, the kind that only meant trouble. Langford tilted his head. "You think you're in a position to tell me how to treat my employees?" "I'm not your employee," Frank said quietly. "I'm just the one who cleans up after you." That did it. Langford nodded once to his men. "Teach him some respect." The first punch came without warning. Frank stumbled back, hitting the marble wall. The mop clattered to the floor. He raised his arms, trying to shield himself, but the blows came faster, fists to his ribs, a knee to his stomach, a hand gripping the back of his neck. His head rang. The sound of their laughter blurred into the thud of pain. He gasped for air. "Please stop." One of the guards sneered. "Still talking." He shoved Frank's face toward the floor. "Lick it clean if you like it so much." Frank's vision swam. He reached for his mop, his only weapon, but it was kicked away. The other guard grabbed him by the collar and shoved him hard. "You know who you're talking to." Frank barely heard him. His ears buzzed. Langford stood a few feet away, checking his reflection in the glass doors, amused. "Enough. Don't kill the man. We still need someone to clean up after you idiots." They laughed again. Frank's nose bled onto the marble. His knees shook. He reached for his bucket, trying to stand, but one guard pushed him down again, this time with enough force that the handle of the bucket snapped. That was when the lobby doors opened. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, unhurried. The kind of footsteps that carried weight, not the weight of fear, but of someone who didn't need to prove they belonged. The laughter faded. Langford turned, already annoyed. "We're closed." Then he saw who it was. Jasonstatham. The man himself, dressed in black, quiet, unreadable. No entourage, no cameras, just him. He'd been upstairs for a late meeting with the Ardent Security Division, one of those corporate partnerships he hated but couldn't avoid. The meeting had run late. He'd been about to leave when he heard the noise from below, the kind of noise he'd heard too many times in his life. Now he stood there, watching three men circle a bleeding janitor. His voice was calm. "What's going on here?" Langford forced a smile. "Ah, Mr. Statham, just a little misunderstanding. One of our staff got clumsy." Jason's eyes moved to Frank, then back to the guards. "Looks more like he got unlucky." One of the guards straightened. "Sir, this is company business. You don't need to." Jason's tone cut like steel. "Company business is cleaning floors with your fists." No one answered. Langford chuckled awkwardly. "You're taking this too seriously. The man's fine." Jason took a step forward. "You think this is fine?" Langford's smirk faltered. Jason's gaze dropped to the floor, to the broken bucket, the spilled water, and the man clutching his side in silence. He exhaled slowly. "I've seen men like you before. You mistake fear for respect." Langford's voice hardened. "You're out of line, Statham." Jason raised a brow. "Am I?" The room went quiet again. The tension was suffocating. The guards shifted uneasily. They weren't sure what to do. They'd all seen the movies. But the man standing before them wasn't playing a role. He wasn't scripted. He was dead serious. Jason crouched beside Frank, helping him up gently. "You all right, mate?" Frank shook his head weakly. "Please, don't get involved." Jason looked at him. "Too late for that." He stood again and faced the men. "You hit an old man because you could. That's not strength." Langford crossed his arms. "And what are you going to do about it?" Jason's eyes darkened. "Whatever it takes to make sure it doesn't happen again." Langford scoffed. "You can't touch me. This is private property." Jason smiled faintly. "Good thing I don't need permission." And right there, in the middle of the marble floor, under the soft hum of security lights, the balance of power began to shift. The bodyguards tensed. Jason's stance never changed, but his presence filled the room. One of the guards took a step forward. "You're making a mistake, mate." Jason tilted his head. "So did you." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The lobby's quiet machines kept humming, and the red exit sign bled its color into the polished floor. Frank stood a little hunched, one hand on his ribs, the other curled around the broken handle of his bucket like a man who still believed in tools more than saviors. Jason kept his hands open at his sides. He'd learned a long time ago that most people see what they expect. Fists invite fists, calm invites choices. He spoke evenly as if he were asking the time. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, eyes on the bodyguards. "You're going to take 3 steps back, he's going to sit down, and your boss is going to apologize." The tallest guard, shaved head, square jaw, the one who'd sneered, snorted. "That's adorable." Langford smirked like a man who sold smiles and called it leadership. "You don't give orders in my building." Jason's gaze didn't leave the guards. Funny, it looked like somebody needed one. The square-jawed guard took a step forward, broad enough to block the light behind him. "You really think we're scared of an actor?" Jason's eyes were tired, almost sad. "No, I think you're scared of losing your place in front of him." He nodded toward Langford without looking. "That's why you hit the old man. Not because you're tough, because you want him to laugh." It landed. For an instant, even the guard's breath slowed. Then he swung. Jason didn't. He shifted barely, and the punch passed him like wind. The man's shoulder met Jason's hand instead, and the force changed direction as gently as a door being closed. The guard stumbled, hit the glossy glass pane with a dull thud, and the window shivered with the sound of money meeting reality. The second guard grabbed for Jason's jacket. Jason let him. The fabric tight, then Jason's elbow flicked upward, a short, efficient arc. It struck the bicep, not cruel, not showy, just decisive. The man's grip opened like a reflex. Jason turned his wrist, guided him forward, and suddenly the guard found his own momentum negotiating with the marble. He knelt, breathless, eyes wide in surprised betrayal. The tall one came again, angrier. Jason stepped in, not away. There was a quick, quiet sound, no louder than a finger tapping a table, and the man froze with Jason's knuckles resting at the hinge of his jaw. Jason didn't hit. He just let the message sink in. The man took his step back. All of it happened in 3 seconds. Not a movie scene, just physics wearing patience. Langford stared, color fading from his cheeks. He gestured sharply. "Enough, enough, both of you stand down." The words came out thinner than he wanted. Jason didn't gloat. He didn't look at the men he'd moved out of the way. He looked at Frank. "Mate, take a seat." Frank nodded, legs shaking. Jason helped him to the gray leather bench by the window and tore a strip from his own handkerchief, pressing it gently beneath Frank's nose. He kept his voice steady, just above a whisper. "Breathe slow. You're all right." Frank gave a small, embarrassed laugh through the sting. "I'm 56, and I still bleed like I'm 20. "You're 56 and you stood up to a billionaire," Jason said. "That's what counts." Frank blinked hard. Years of swallowed pride swirled with the copper taste of his own blood. "They're going to fire me." Jason glanced at Langford. "We'll see." Langford straightened his tie as if it were a shield. "This is over. You've made your point. My security team will escort you out, and the janitor can file a complaint in the morning like everyone else if he still works here." He nodded like a judge. "We're done." Jason turned toward him slowly. Something shifted in his face. The part of him that remembered barracks with names stitched on uniforms, remembered men who could lift mountains but wouldn't because someone watched. "You like done," Jason said softly. "Done is tidy. Done doesn't require you to look at people." Langford's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about me." Jason nodded at the broken bucket, the wet pant legs, the dark bruise already blooming on Frank's cheekbone. "I know enough." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. The guards tensed again. He ignored them and pointed the camera upward to the black half-moon in the corner ceiling where a security dome blinked orange like a sleepy eye. "How far back do those cameras record?" he asked. Langford's smile slithered back. "Long enough to show you trespassing on a private incident." "Good," Jason said. "Call your security director. Now I'll wait." Langford's lips parted for a retort. Then he closed them. He waved at the desk console behind the marble reception. The night operator, a young woman who'd watched the whole thing with both hands pressed to her mouth, picked up the line with shaking fingers. "Connect me to Harper," Langford snapped. "Now." While they waited, Jason pulled a chair from the far wall and set it beside Frank. He folded his jacket and slid it behind Frank's back like a cushion. Frank began to protest. Jason held up a hand. "Let me help." Frank swallowed. "Why?" Jason looked at him, and for a second, the lobby's glittering cold softened. "Because someone helped me once. Because the world doesn't change on its own." A door dinged. The elevator slid open. A woman in her 50s stepped out briskly with a lanyard that read Harper CHEN, Director of Security. Her eyes moved fast, the sort that counted people and exits without thinking. She took in the scene in one sweep. The broken yellow mop bucket, the wet arc on the marble, the guards holding themselves like men who'd been told to stand still, Frank's blood, Jason's stillness, and the CEO whose calm was all on the surface. "Mr. Langford," she said, voice even, "you asked for me." Langford gestured disdainfully at Frank. "We had a spill. Our janitor caused a hazard. He got mouthy and then clumsy. My men had to restrain him. The celebrity inserted himself. Now everyone thinks they're important." Jason didn't move. "Harper, is it?" he asked, eyes on her respectfully. "Do your cameras cover the lobby from the south elevator to this bench?" "Yes," she said, "an audio S recorded by the front desk for liability." "Why?" "Because this man was assaulted," Jason said, "and your boss is hoping no one cares enough to prove it." Harper's gaze flicked to Frank. Something in her face, something that remembered what it felt like to be invisible, hardened. "Mr. Frank," she said gently, "do you need medical attention?" Frank tried to wave it off. "I'll be fine, just my ribs a bit." Jason shook his head. "He needs a doctor." Langford stepped in sharply. "No one is calling an ambulance. Do you understand? We settle this internally." "You don't get to settle a battery," Jason said, calm as a winter lake. "You can call the ambulance, or I will. And if that camera footage goes missing, I'll assume that's because it shows exactly what we all know it shows." Harper turned a cool stare on Langford. "Sir, legally we have to preserve it anyway. New policy after," she stopped herself. "After last spring." Langford's nostrils flared. "Fine, call whoever you want. I'll speak to legal in the morning." Jason's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked back at Langford. "You'll speak to them now. I just texted your general counsel. We worked on a charity gala 6 months ago. She's awake." Something in Langford's eyes flashed, surprise arcing into anger. "You arrogant." The elevator dinged again, and this time it wasn't one person. 2 EMTs rolled in a small kit and a collapsible stretcher, rain spotted on their shoulders. Behind them came a woman in jeans and a blazer, hair pulled into a blunt ponytail. Andrea Ruiz, general counsel of Ardent Global, according to the lanyard she clipped on as she walked. She took one long look and went straight to Frank. "Sir, I'm Andrea. Please sit tight. They're going to check you out." Harper pulled the last hour of lobby footage. She stood without waiting for a response and turned to Langford. "What happened?" Langford, off balance, found his script. He slipped. Security stepped in. "This man," he pointed at Jason, "agitated the situation." Andrea blinked slowly, then turned to Jason. "Is that your version too?" "No," Jason said. "My version is, your guards humiliated a janitor because your boss thinks power is a toy, and your cameras will back me up." Andrea exhaled once through her nose like a person who hates surprises more than she hates storms. She nodded at Harper. "Pull it." Harper gestured to the front desk. The operator already had the monitor open, hands steadier now that there was a system to stand on. The screen split into 4 views: wide lobby, elevator bank, front doors, and a low angle that caught the bucket, the mop, and the men's shoes. They watched in heavy silence. The splash, the first shove, the kick to the bucket, Frank's quiet protest, the nod from Langford, the blows. It was different on footage, colder. There was no smell of cleaner, no tremor in Frank's hands, no shame in his eyes, just angles and proof. But sometimes proof is exactly what shame can't outrun. Andrea's face emptied. She looked at Langford and the lawyer disappeared from her voice. In its place came something smaller and more dangerous. "Richard, did you nod?" Langford straightened his tie again and didn't answer. Harper cleared her throat softly. "There's audio from the desk microphone in the corner, Ms. Ruiz." They played it again with sound. You could hear the laugh. You could hear Frank's, "No one should treat people like this." You could hear Langford's teach him some respect, and you could hear the thud of knuckles meeting a rib that had already worked a full shift. The EMTs exchanged a look that said what the footage didn't. That man isn't going home tonight without painkillers. Andrea closed her eyes once. When she opened them, she had a clipboard in her hand and a pen poised like a gavel. "Mr. Frank," she said, voice gentled, "I'm authorizing immediate paid medical leave. You are not to return to work until cleared by a doctor. We will cover all expenses." Frank blinked. "I can't afford." "You won't have to," Andrea said. "This is on us." Langford's voice sharpened. "You don't speak for me." "I speak for the company," Andrea said. "And at the moment I'm also speaking for common sense." Jason stayed quiet. He'd learned when to push and when to let a system fix itself because it was suddenly scared of the mirror. Andrea turned to the guards. "Turn in your badges. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending investigation. Do not leave town." The tall one opened his mouth, but Andrea didn't raise her voice. She just said, "Please don't make me call the police while the ambulance is still here." The guards handed over their access cards with the same expression men wear when a bar brawl ends, and the lights come up. Andrea set the cards on the marble, then faced Langford. For the first time, she let Jason see the strain beneath her composure, decades spent defending a company that sometimes deserved it and sometimes didn't. "Richard, go upstairs." Langford laughed too high. "You're firing me." "No," she said. "I'm giving you 5 minutes to practice the apology you're about to deliver on camera." His mouth opened, closed. Fear ran a quick line through his eyes. "You can't." She nodded at the cameras. "We already did." Langford looked at Jason like a man realizing the game had changed without asking him. "Is this the part where you feel like a hero?" Jason's face didn't move. "No, this is the part where you remember you're not the main character." The EMTs eased Frank onto the small wheeled stretcher. He murmured something about his daughter and her inhaler. Jason stepped beside him. "What's her name?" Jason asked. "Emily," Frank said. She works nights sometimes, nursing school. I don't want her to worry." Jason nodded. "Do you have her number?" Frank recited it slow, and Jason typed it into his phone. He hit call. On the third ring, a tired voice answered, cautious. "Hello." "Hi, Emily," Jason said. "My name's Jason. I'm with your dad at Arden Tower. He's okay, but the medics are going to take him to St. Luke's to be checked over." Silence, then what happened? "He didn't answer my text, he always." "He slipped," Frank croaked, instinctively trying to protect her. He winced. "I'll be fine, baby." Jason didn't contradict him, but his voice softened. "I'll meet you at the ER entrance and bring you back to him. Don't drive too fast." "Okay," she said, and the word broke a little. "Thank you." Jason hung up and squeezed Frank's shoulder lightly. "She's on her way." Frank nodded, sick with relief. "Thank you, Mr. Statham." "Just Jason." As the EMTs wheeled Frank toward the doors, Jason turned back to Andrea. "I'll go with him." "Please," she said, "and thank you." She meant it not like a fan, but like a person. Jason nodded once, then he looked at Harper. "You did the right thing." Harper shrugged one shoulder. "Trying to do it earlier would have gotten me fired. Doing it now might too, but I like my sleep." Jason almost smiled. "I know the feeling." He took 2 steps, then paused and glanced back at Langford, who stood rigid, hands white at his sides. The marble floor reflected him the way a sea reflects a storm, honest, patient. "You should practice that apology," Jason said quietly. Langford stared at him, eyes flinty. "This isn't over." Jason's reply was soft enough that only the nearest 3 people heard it. "That's the point." The rain felt good. It cleared the scent of chemical cleaner from Jason's lungs. He slid into the back of the ambulance beside Frank as the EMT checked vital signs with the clipped kindness of someone who sees too many midnights. "What do you do, really?" Frank asked between breaths. Jason looked at him. "Bit of this, bit of that." Frank gave a weak laugh. "You're not supposed to be funny." Jason's mouth tilted. "Don't tell anybody." The EMT interrupted. "Ribs tender, but nothing's broken from what I can tell. We'll run films. Nose is bloodied, might be a small fracture. We'll tape you up and make you handsome, old-timer." Frank chuckled, then winced. "Handsome's expensive." Tonight it's on the house, the EMT said. Jason looked out the back window as the city slid by, bridges of light over black water, traffic pulsing like a silent heartbeat. He'd been in a lot of vehicles at night. Most of them moved toward trouble. This one moved toward repair. When they arrived, Jason helped guide the stretcher in, ignoring the looks that said, "Is that?" He'd learned to let faces keep their curiosity. He kept his hood up and his head down whenever he could. He texted Emily the ER entrance and waited under the covered drive, hands deep in his jacket pockets. 10 minutes later, a small sedan jerked into the lot, parked crooked, and a young woman ran toward him with her bag banging against her hip. She had her father's eyes, gentle, worried without permission. "Jason?" she asked, breathless. He nodded. "Where is he?" He led her to the desk, and through the double doors to a curtained bay where Frank lay with a nasal strip, trying to make jokes about oxygen saturation, while the nurse rolled her eyes affectionately. "Dad," Emily whispered, and her voice cracked the way only a daughter's can. She folded herself around the bed rail and kissed his forehead. "You scared me." "Sorry, Em," Frank said. "Didn't mean to make you leave class." "I wasn't in class," she lied. "I was studying." She turned to Jason. "Thank you for calling me. How did you?" "I was there," he said simply. "Your dad didn't deserve what happened." He didn't say no one does because sometimes what you don't say keeps the room breathing. Emily swallowed. He never says anything, even when rent goes up, even when, she blinked the rest away. He just keeps working. Frank tried to wave it off. "We're fine." Emily looked at his bandaged nose. "You're not fine." Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain white card, the kind with a single number and nothing else. He pressed it into Emily's hand. "If anyone from the company calls and tries to nudge you into something you don't understand, ring me first. Or if you just need someone to sit in the room and pretend to be a wall." Emily stared at the card like it was a strange flower. "Why would you?" "Because he reminded me of my dad," Jason said. "He worked nights too. He didn't talk much about pain. That kind of quiet needs allies." Emily nodded, breath shaking. "Okay." They stayed until the doctor came and confirmed what the EMT suspected. Bruised ribs, a nose that would be tender for weeks, a prescription, and strict instructions not to go back to work for at least 10 days. Frank protested weakly. "I can't miss." Jason lifted a palm. "You're not missing, you're healing, different job." When they were ready to discharge, Jason walked them out into the early blue-gray of almost morning. The rain had thinned to a damp secret. Emily looked up. "How are we going to get home?" She glanced at her battered car. "I can drive, but—" "I've got it," Jason said. He called a car service he trusted, the kind that doesn't post selfies, and waited with them until the driver pulled up. He helped Frank into the back seat and handed Emily a folded envelope. She looked at it like it might bite. "What is it?" "Groceries and a week of breathing easy," he said. "Just take it." "That's too much," she whispered, exactly like a kid who'd learned to ration gratitude. "It isn't," he said. "It's the right amount." She nodded, tears bright but not falling. "Thank you." "Take care of him," Jason said. "I always do," she replied, and then she surprised him. She stepped forward and hugged him, quick, awkward, fierce. He hugged back like he'd learned from small nieces. Not too tight, not too long, just enough to say present. The car pulled away. Jason watched the taillights dissolve into the threads of traffic. He waited until they turned the corner, then he exhaled. His phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number, Andrea Ruiz. "Footage secured. Statement prepared. Press won't be alerted by us. If Mr. Langford wants to dig a deeper hole, I can't stop him, but Frank is covered, full salary during leave medical. Thank you." Jason answered, "Do right by the others you don't see too. There are more Franks." She replied, "I know, working on it." But by noon, the building had a different temperature. News doesn't move inside corporations by headline. It moves by coffee machine. Harper watched people whisper in pairs and threes as they passed the lobby. The mop was new. The bucket too. She, Dee, ordered them at 8 and put them center stage like a small, bright altar to a better future. Langford came down at 1 o'clock with 2 lawyers and a face that had rehearsed smiling as an attack. He walked to the same spot on the marble where the bucket had spilled, where the floor still looked a shade darker. Cameras blinked their little lead eyelids. Andrea stood off to the side, arms crossed, choosing silence as a weapon. "Roll it," Langford muttered to the communications director. A red light on the handheld camera glowed. He cleared his throat. "I would like to address a private incident that occurred last night in our lobby," he began, voice pitched low and somber. Emotions ran high. Mistakes were made. Jason, who'd returned without noise and sat in one of the lobby chairs with a newspaper he wasn't reading, looked up. He could smell mistakes were made from a mile away. "It always meant I did this, but I don't want the verbs to touch me." Harper, from her post, glanced at him. He blinked once slow. She understood. She stepped forward. "Sir," she said to Langford gently but loudly enough, "before you finish that sentence, you might want to watch the footage again with the rest of us, this time with your apology on the other side." Langford's jaw worked. He stared at the lenses watching him, then at the faces behind them. Not fans, not followers, witnesses. He swallowed. The lines around his eyes deepened. "Mr. Frank," he said, voice catching on the name like it had thorns, "I'm sorry." The words were small and enormous at the same time. They didn't undo what was done. They never do. But sometimes words are the first tool that isn't a fist. He finished the statement, stumbled through actual responsibility, and ended with a promise he'd either keep or be crushed by. The cameras turned off. Jason folded his newspaper. He stood. For a moment, Langford looked at him like a man hoping for a cue that would tell him how to redeem a scene. Jason offered none. He simply said, "Make sure the apology reaches the one person who earned it." Langford nodded once, almost imperceptibly. But 3 days later, Emily opened the door of their small apartment to find a plain package on the mat. No note, just a sender line she didn't recognize until she did. Harper C. Inside was a new nebulizer for her dad's granddaughter, Emily's little girl, who spent 2 nights a month with them when her mom worked late. And inside that, tucked like a secret, were 3 lanyards and a folded schedule. On the back of the schedule was a handwritten message. "We're forming a night shift committee. Cameras don't catch everything. People do. If you want to help make the building safer for the ones no one sees, come by Tuesday at 10. You don't have to speak, you just have to be there. H." Emily stood there for a long time, the door still open, sunlight pooling on the cheap linoleum. Her dad, taped ribs and all, sat up on the sofa. "What is it, Em?" She smiled, tired and fierce. "A job offer, I think." She turned the schedule so he could read it. "For all of us." He looked at her. The sigh he exhaled had been waiting in him for 14 years. About time. But that night, Jason walked along the river where the city throws glitter on dark water just to see it move. He didn't call anyone. He didn't tell the story. He just let the noise of the world pass through him until it was thin enough to see the quiet underneath. His phone buzzed once more. A photo from an unknown number, then a quick text from Frank. "Emily helped me send it." The photo showed a small kitchen table, 2 bowls of soup, and a third bowl in the center, covered with a napkin like a promise kept. Beneath it, a caption, "For the person we don't see but need. We'll keep a chair open from now on." Jason stared at it, and something in his face turned gentler. He typed back, "I'll keep a chair open too." He slipped the phone away, put his hands in his pockets, and kept walking. Not a hero, not a headline, just a man with enough quiet to hear when someone finally said enough and meant it. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in a room full of power isn't a fist or a fortune. It's the first person who refuses to look away.